Save the Semantics, episode 269. It is August 19th, 2024. My name is Myro. This is the podcast where I ramble on for a bit about some shit. Recording this on a Monday afternoon/evening, right at the beginning of the week. I had a nice little, had a pretty solid weekend for the most part. Yesterday, towards like kind of the end of the day, I was just like, oh man, I felt this just kind of this tiredness sort of wash over, as if I needed a bit more rest going into this week. And this morning I was kind of worried. I was like, oh man, how am I going to be feeling? I wasn't feeling super great this morning, but I feel that I kind of bounced back a bit, and feeling all right overall, feeling not too bad. It was nice just being able to catch up with some people this past weekend. Was able to enjoy some time with them, and it was good. It was kind of a much needed time for me, since I feel like it's been a little while since I've really done too much outside of what my regular schedule is. So nice change of pace, as I like to say. I have done a bit more with Unicorn Overlord. I'm sort of, I believe I may be like, just based on what the game is sort of telling me in terms of the completion percentage amount, if you want to call it that, the map size, the number of quests available, that kind of thing. Just the feeling I get from the story progression is that I'm about like 80% of my way through the game itself. There might be some additional content, some post-game material that could be available. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't really looked into that because I fear that I might kind of spoil myself on some things. But I think that based on some of the conversations I've seen, I think that in order to get a sort of like 100% completion for this game, it's like 70-80 hours or something like that, which is like pretty reasonable, honestly, in comparison to a lot of other games where it takes much more time to be able to quote unquote get 100% completion. The whatever those requirements might be can differ from different websites and that sort of thing, but I think with this game, you have a pretty good indication of what it means to fully complete this game, which is like doing all the quests, I'm assuming recruiting all of the units that you're able to, and filling out the map and that sort of thing. It seems fairly reasonable in terms of what you're able to do, so I think that I might pursue it, depending on how I'm feeling after I beat the main quest, whatever, main story. I might pursue that. I might try to do all of it, because I do enjoy the game. I enjoy outside of kind of the main gameplay part of the game, which is the combat. I have enjoyed kind of doing some of the leisurely stuff too. There's kind of this, I'm really not for one that's like super into like collectibles and stuff, in terms of, trying to get items and that sort of thing. But with this game, it's really, one, it helps with you being able to upgrade parts of your units, upgrade like the size of your units and that sort of thing. So continuing to do these little small collectible, not really quests, but collectible requests, it makes it a little easier to build up your team and that sort of thing. So there's incentive to do that. You know what I mean? I think this game and a lot of other games, when there's sort of like a reward attached to you doing something, I'm more inclined to do it. You know what I mean? I think it's a little difficult for me to get into some other games, like something like Animal Crossing, where I think that, just based on my understanding, a lot of the things that you do is sort of for like the intrinsic kind of value that you get out of it, the enjoyment you get out of it. Like if you are sort of like building out your island or whatever, you're doing it because you want it to look a certain way. And I'm not someone who really cares too much about building out, that's why I've never gotten into like Minecraft. Like Minecraft is just not something for me because sure, I understand that, there's as the game has been updated over, a decade plus, there's much more to it now than the original state. But if you really are sticking with what the main intention of the game is, which is to build stuff, it's just not something that I find to be super enjoyable, because I sure, I can be creative, but I'm just not someone who likes to build something, to like create stuff. It's just not something that's really appealed to me, like ever, for a lot of games. You know what I mean? Again, there are definitely exceptions to that rule, but it's just that when there's just like an objective that I can do, like for example in Unicorn Overlord, there's like certain quests where you can like rebuild bridges and stuff like that. Like in my head that makes sense because that's like a clear objective that you can kind of stick to and work towards, and you also get benefits from that. You're able to receive income and other items and that sort of thing. So when there's kind of like a thing that's attached to you completing something, if there's a reward at the end, that kind of makes me drive to actually complete the quest. And the majority of the quests in Unicorn Overlord has some sort of reward, whether it's money or an item. Maybe it's equipment for the characters that they can use, or it's like a consumable or some other stuff. There's always something that's like worth trying to complete the quest for. And it's just kind of different with other games where there's really no, it's like your creativity is like kind of what drives the game, and there's no real reward for you building something. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, build this thing and you'll get a certain amount of gold. Like that's not something that I think is super, it's not really a part of like Minecraft and that sort of thing. You know what I mean? So I've never just been, I've never really been, that's never really appealed to me personally. So that's kind of why I like games like this, like Unicorn Overlord and stuff, where there is sort of like a percentage based thing where you know where you're making progress toward completion. It sort of like works with that part of my brain that enjoys it, but it's sort of interesting to think about where if there isn't a thing attached, if there isn't some kind of reward that's given after you complete something, I'm just not interested in pursuing that. Another aspect of this game, which I think is good if you are interested in kind of the characters and the dialogue and the development and whatnot. I personally don't really care too much about the characters. They're not, some of them are more interesting than others, but I think the cast overall is fine. I think they're solid. they do need to cover a lot of ground since there are over 60 kind of interactable characters in the game. So it's a little difficult outside of Elaine, who's the main character of the story, to really give a lot to each of these characters, right? Most of them only interact with a few characters, and that's just kind of that. So it's just a little difficult to really flesh them out, and that's fine. That's just kind of how the game is designed. But you do have there is an aspect in the game which is called rapport, which is essentially the support conversations from Fire Emblem, in which as you build up certain relationships with different characters, they can grow affinities between each other, and there's like stat bonuses and that kind of thing. And then you can also see these conversations between them. In a similar fashion to Fire Emblem, you have the ability to marry characters. I think in Unicorn Overlord, I think the only character that you can marry off is the main character, which is Elaine. So there's not really like a marriage option for the other characters, which is, maybe it's a little disappointing for someone who wants a bit more social interaction and social gameplay in this game, but it's okay. It's never been the forefront of my tastes, but I think it can be kind of fun. Anyways, so you have the option of, I think your main character, he has the option of marrying like pretty much any of the women in the game. That's just how it's set up. And so when you decide who you want to marry off, who you want him to marry off to, they'll, you go through like a little cutscene thing where you give a ring and it, it's like kind of cute. The funny thing is, within those conversations that you have with the main character and whoever he can choose to betroth, the last conversation between all of them, I'm assuming, because this was very similar to, because I've seen like a few of those conversations, but I'm assuming that all of those conversations kind of go the same way, where it's like, Elaine, I fell. Can you pick me up? I haven't felt this kind of way before. It's that kind of thing. Sort of cheesy, cliche, romantic sort of dialogue. And the funny thing is, I think this is my understanding, because I haven't really seen this happen. I've only seen this happen once, but I think that regardless of whether you get married or not, that conversation still happens. So one instance, I already married off my main character to like a witch character, because she's like kind of cool, and she's been around for like the majority of the story, and so I feel like it kind of makes sense in the context of the story. And I had one of those conversations with another character, in which there was sort of like a confession of love between, and I'm like, hey, that's a little scandalous right there. So the way that they bypass that to be like, hey, listen, it's a little unethical, it's a little morally ambiguous, but it was just a dream. That's how they tell it off. It's like, after you see that conversation, the main character, Elaine, is like, no, that was just a dream. It was just like, I mustn't, I already hold hands with someone else. That was simply a dream. I need to let that go. And I'm assuming that little snippet, that little kind of monologue that he has, happens every single time that he has a conversation with another character. And I personally have not seen that happen yet, but I kind of want to test it. I want to test it to see if that is the case, because that's pretty funny. I think that's really funny, that they kind of like bypass that by like being like, hey, listen, technically married off, but it's fine. It's fine. He's not doing anything wrong. He's just sort of like potentially emotionally, thinking about someone else, or he's like emotionally thinking about, the 30 other women in this game. And I think just for the heck of it, I just want to just test it out and see if that little conversation piece like pops up. It's just funny. It's just like a funny little touch, because it's like, you can't. The game is already like made to be where it's like, okay, so if you did decide to pick, a specific woman, they're already, it's just like, oh, the conversation thread that led up to that point of like a confession of love, it kind of makes sense, right? But they needed to do that for every potential interaction, and it's a little difficult to like go, I'm assuming it's a little difficult to try to like program it so the conversation changes. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, because he didn't pick this, this marriage option, you're going to get another alternative conversation instead. It's like, might as well just use this blanket statement of like, it was just a dream. No, it wasn't. It didn't happen. No way. It didn't happen. Can't have your main character being a little, not exactly the most, morally upstanding person. You can't have that. It would also be a little out of character too, just because of the way the main character is portrayed. But it would be kind of funny, because like he is kind of, I don't know. He is so morally righteous that it's like, it would be funny if there was like one part of them that was maybe a little, questionable, because then that would give him a little, give him a little bit of depth. But he's not the most interesting character. He's just funny because he is also, you could also consider him to be, maybe a bit of your like a self-insert in which you yourself, kind of view yourself as like the main character kind of thing, right? In a typical fashion with a lot of other games. So maybe there's that aspect as well. So it's like, you can't have him. No, you can't have him be, cheating on his his wife. Like that can't be happening. But it could be interesting, you know what I mean? It's just like everything else about him is just like, oh, he's perfect. He's the leader of the revolution, the people, like that sort of thing. But his relationships are questionable. Like that could make for a fun kind of thing, you know what I mean? But whatever, it's fine. It was just kind of funny that sort of like popped up. And that was like the solution. The solution being, you just have this little insert text box that says that, oh, it was just a dream. It was just a dream. I am very excited, and I know I've been talking about this for a minute now, for a while now. I'm just excited for Zelda, man. It's coming up. It's coming in a month, which is nothing, and it's crazy to say because, you expect, especially with the last few releases of Zelda, you expect there not to be like a Zelda game for a while, but you got this little 2D one, and I think it's gonna be a lot of fun, and I'm very much looking forward to it. As I've mentioned before, I think that just based on my feelings about where things are kind of like currently trending in gaming and that sort of thing. And I mentioned this last time as well, where there were kind of reports about the Switch being delayed until, the Switch being delayed and, the timing of it being maybe like after April or Q1 of 2025. I think it feels like there's like this kind of ramp up happening right now of releases and that sort of thing. I really hope that maybe for the release of the Switch 2 that Wind Waker and Twilight Princess will show up. And I know that I said that, well, actually, I don't even remember what I said technically. My feelings about those remakes was that it just might not happen. You know what I mean? It didn't happen at all during the Switch generation. So it's kind of, it's like, well, maybe you should just kind of give that up a little bit. But I think it would be really nice to see it come for Switch 2. I feel that it's a little hard for me to see there being a new, like another, like it's not going to happen. Like there's not going to be another like 3D Zelda that's going to get released at launch for the Switch 2. We already had Tears of the Kingdom, less than what would be kind of like less than, it came out last year. So maybe it's like for Switch 2, there will be like an HD version of, or, like a upscaled version of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom and that sort of thing, which is like kind of, it's a little scummy, but whatever, it is what it is. If the Switch 2 ends up being backwards compatible and those games are like re-released for Switch 2, it's like, okay, there's really no, people are probably going to buy it anyway just because they're like, ooh, pretty graphics and that sort of thing, which is fine, but it still feels a little, not very consumer friendly. But I considering that they are releasing, Echoes of Wisdom, and then going into next year, it's a little hard for me to imagine that there's going to be like a new Zelda game outside of that. So I feel like it would be good to have, alongside, like a new Mario Kart, and alongside those kind of big titles for, the Switch launch, also have Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. I feel like that would make sense. It's like, okay, maybe myself, maybe a little bit more inclined to buy a Switch 2, right? And I said, I am not really, someone who ever buys consoles on release. I've never been that person. I usually wait like quite a while because I feel that I can still use the current console that I'm playing on. Like I had a 3DS for the longest time. That was like my console up until I finally got a Switch. Like 2-3 years. No, it was maybe a couple years. Like a couple years after the Switch was released, I finally got it. Right. So it's I will feel more inclined to buy the new console if there are games that I would really like to play. Obviously I think, as I said, like if it's like a Xenoblade game is announced and it's like, okay, and then you got Zelda, it's like, that's a pretty good package. If you have like 2-3 games that's, that you can't have, or rather you won't be able to play without getting the new system, it's like, okay, that's a little, maybe I'm willing to drop some money on that, you know what I mean? So that's just something to think about. I think that with Echoes of Wisdom and the fact that there is sort of this, I don't know, because the fact, kind of the strange almost frequency of these Zelda releases from last year to this year, it's like, okay, maybe they can follow that up and have another, release next year as well. A re-release is more likely than an actual new game, right? Because there's 2 new games in a row. That's hard to, that's hard to follow up. Anyways, I think there's also been some talks about how the price tag for the Switch has been quote unquote rumored or leaked or whatever. Some people are saying that's going to be pushing like $500, which is a little bit, I feel, going from, how much was the Switch? $200-300, right? And then a jump up to by $200. It's a little bit. It's a little bit of a price. If that is the case, then I probably won't be getting it soon. If it is like a little bit more, if it's like 100 more than what the, current, what the current Switch price is, which is like 300, like a brand new OLED model is maybe like 300, I think. And it's like maybe in the 400 range. That might be reasonable. That might be okay. Like I have been I've pushed back against getting like a PlayStation 5. One, because of the price tag. It's expensive. It's been expensive, and it continues to, be in that price range. And then two, and I know this criticism has been used to death essentially, but there really is not a ton of games that draw me to PlayStation, right? Currently, at least. I'm like struggling to think like what games. I mean, maybe like Final Fantasy, the newest Final Fantasy games. I can't even think of it. God of War, kind of. It seems like cool, but it's just like outside of those, kind of exclusives. I really struggle. I really can't think of Elden Ring, maybe. Right? There's like a few games, and I'm sure I could look up a list of the best PlayStation 5 titles and whatnot, but it's just not enough for me to justify getting a console like that. And like, it's like, okay, as someone who is like pretty much solely a Switch owner, it really is the system that kind of houses a ton of games, including the new and the old, especially the old, as I've kind of talked about playing older games as I have this year in particular. Like, that's very difficult to, I don't know, give up. Not give up, but it's very hard to be like, okay, well then try out this brand new system. PlayStation 5 is not even that new at this point, but try out the newest gen, where we only have like a kind of a select few premium games that are excellent and that look awesome and that are fun to play. But it's like that's a difficult argument to make for me, especially, you know what I mean? It's like I already have so many games that I have on my list with the Switch. So it's difficult to kind of make that transition, or rather just make the purchase, you know what I mean? And have like a second console. And that's just like added space too. It's like, it's just a little too much at this point. So, maybe in the future, as I said before, maybe further down the line, if I am really feeling like, okay, maybe I'm missing out and I really want to play these games. But I feel that there is a good thing with waiting and, holding off on buying kind of the newest thing. Because there's so much out there that you really don't need to be on top of every single new release that comes out. There are so many games. There's so many games from past generations that do exist that are on current consoles. So if you whatever you have, whether it's a Switch, Xbox, or PlayStation, like, you have so many games at kind of availability, right? And I know maybe I'm contradicting myself by saying these things, but like for PlayStation 5, you can play PlayStation 4 games. You know what I mean? And I think that there's like a pretty decent library there. So I guess that maybe could be an argument for me getting one, but I still have a hard time justifying that. just, time commitments and all these other things as well. So I guess my point, I guess another point rather, in the case for like Switch 2, it's like there has to be like a few things that really have to like convince me in order to like get it as like a day one thing, which again, I'm most likely not. It's gotta have, it's gotta have some really good games. It's gotta be backwards compatible, and it's gotta be like a decent price too. Those are kind of like the three things that I have to really consider before buying it. You know what I mean? If I'm not able to play the games that I already own for Switch, with the Switch 2, it's kind of like, okay, that would also be like a huge mistake on their part as well. If they want people to, convert from, the Switch 1 library to Switch 2, if there's no backwards compatibility, as I've said, that's it's a pretty big error on their part. But again, we'll see what happens. If there is Zelda, if there's like a Xenoblade, if there's some other stuff that really, that really makes me want to get the console, along with the fact that it's like backwards compatible, then I'll probably get then I'll probably get it sometime, maybe sooner rather than later. But for the time being, just based on complete shot in the dark, complete speculation, I probably won't be getting it. But the rumors are really starting to pick up. There's been discussions and some news articles coming out about, certain manufacturers, that develop parts of the controllers for the Switch that are sort of talking about it. There was this, obviously Nintendo has sort of already acknowledged it. They had like a thing today where it was like talking about it was like the Nintendo Museum, and for the announcement tweet, there's like a follow-up tweet that said, we will not be discussing any new games or the new console. Like, they just straight up said that. So it's like, okay, they're acknowledging it. I feel like timing wise, it kind of makes sense, for them to provide another update, maybe within the next month or so, depending on if there is sort of like a September quote unquote direct. We'll see if that happens, if there even is one. But yeah, lots to kind of consider, in that realm. And I'll probably be talking more about it as rumors start to, come up more, and once obviously there is like an official announcement, then I'll definitely talk about it. Anyways, just wanted to do a quick catch up on some stuff, my weekend. I'm hoping that this week will be, will be all right in terms of just my level of busyness, if you want to call it that. But just gotta take it day by day. And obviously I'll talk about some more stuff if I'm able to. I did watch. I have gotten. I was going to mention that I'm a good way through the last season of Mob Psycho. A little more than halfway. But I'll hold off on talking about the series until I finish it, because I think that I want to give it a little more time to just give my thoughts on the season and the series as a whole. Part of me wants to like rewatch it again, but I do have some other stuff that I want to watch as well, so maybe I'll do a rewatch like later down the line. But yeah, maybe anticipate some Mob Psycho talk this weekend. Okay, that's gonna do it for now, and I will check back in either later this week or weekend. Alrighty, it is August 23rd, 2024, recording this on a Friday afternoon/evening. If you think about it, like every time after 12 is technically the afternoon. Like even nighttime is the afternoon, but whatever, it doesn't, you know what I mean. It's around that time. I've had a nice little week. I've been occupied and a little busy with stuff, but I've been able to catch up, or rather finish, Mob Psycho. And so I want to talk about that a little bit. I've been playing a little bit of Unicorn Overlord and some other stuff here and there, but not super extensively. Maybe I'll play some more this weekend. And maybe I'll get into something new, which, depending on what I watch, I will talk about it next week around. I have considered, as some discussion, I've considered getting back and watching Attack on Titan, because that's been long overdue, and I'm on a bit of a anime kick right now, and so I think I might just like ride that momentum, you know what I mean, and just like dive right back into it. It has been a very long time, and it's been a long time coming. I think that I owe the series the attention that it deserves before I put it off for far too long. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. And I had this kind of recently with a book series, actually. There's a book series that I read a long time ago, back in probably around like college or high school. And there's a book that I kind of just left. I think I read like 100 pages, but I was like struggling to get through it. The full book was like, I don't know, it was like 600, 700 pages. The series is now like over, I'm pretty sure. And I actually went to the library, I think it was like last weekend, and I found the series. I found the last book, and I know this is like maybe sacrilege a little bit, where at the very beginning of, I picked up the last book. I didn't borrow it. I was just in the library, just sort of skimming through it. At the very front of the very last book in the series, there is sort of like a summary of all of the things that happened throughout the series, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that, and it was cool to sort of, I didn't fully dive back into the world like maybe that I wanted to, but I did sort of get like a sense of, the plot and everything like that. I read the summary and the outline, and I was kind of like, okay, I actually don't think that I missed out here. I think that, unfortunately, I had sort of, the time that had passed between me reading the series and like the book that I stopped reading in particular, a lot of time had passed where I was no longer engaged with the material. You know what I mean? And it is kind of unfortunate that can happen. I think that's happened with me with some TV shows, where it's just like so much time has passed since I, went back and watched it or read it and that kind of thing. And I just no longer have the same interest that I did before, and that's fine. I do feel like, and this is, I don't know, this is sort of weird, but I do feel like that I got some sense of closure with that series in a weird way. I don't know if I'll ever actually go back and read them, because one, they're massive books, and I just, again, it's just timing and everything like that. Books just take much, much more longer for me to, go through than as opposed to a movie, show, game, that kind of thing. But I did get like a sense of closure, in the sense of like, okay, this is where kind of the series was headed. Part of me expected that, it's a fantasy series. Black Prism, I think that was the name of the first book, but I forgot the full series name. The first book in the series was called Black Prism. This is a Lightbringer. Lightbringer was the name of the series, but Lightbringer by Brent Weeks. I did really like. I really enjoyed his Way of Shadows series before, which is it's like an assassin novel. Those are great. Those are like awesome, super fun to read. And I think I liked parts of this new series from, you know, what I remember reading it back then. But at a certain point, it just felt like too bloated and just like too much. It's one of those things where it's like, I appreciate some level of density in a book, in literature, but at a certain point, it feels maybe a little frivolous. I really, you know, I of course appreciate the language, you know, the literary techniques that authors use and that sort of thing. But I think I found myself more nowadays, again, and this is also just like a time thing as well, but when I do read, I think I appreciate writing that is like, it is very well written in terms of the visualization, if they use like similes and, you know, comparative language and that kind of thing, that really like paint a picture. But I also appreciate when a book sort of gets to the point, gets to really the heart of what it's trying to tell. You know what I mean? I think with characters and with world building and that kind of thing, I do think it's really cool to have a very, you know, well realized world and that kind of thing. And I think younger me would have liked that more in terms of just like the fantastical elements of, you know, and the sky, you know, just like the castles were as high as the clouds, like all those kinds of things, and in detail, just like the bustling of the streets, like there's those kinds of details I think can be really, you know, you can really immerse yourself in that kind of thing. But ultimately I found that what I value from something of like a literary, you know, piece of fiction is that I want to have, there's something that has to like connect with me. Like there has to be something that really is like, okay, what's sort of like the main thread? What are the characters, you know, how are they going to overcome whatever struggle that they're going through? You know what I mean? What is sort of the drive? What is their drive in continuing moving forward and that kind of thing? That I think I look towards more so than the lore, I guess, and like the history of the world. Like there's definitely a lot of interest to be had there, and that's not something that, it's not that I don't dislike it necessarily. Like I can appreciate lore and you know, delving into, you know, like, oh, this was something that happened thousands of years ago in the history of this world, and that's currently affecting the characters currently, and that can be kind of interesting to look at. But I really want to go into like the heart of a story, and I think that when you look at something that is so extensive and lengthy as like a 600-page novel, it sort of, you know, it's difficult to kind of delve into. Plus you also have to like you have to like remember the characters and that sort of thing, and that can be kind of difficult, especially in my case, where you haven't come back to the novel in such a long time, or the series in such a long time. You just don't remember any of that. So yeah, I think when it comes to like books, I prefer kind of like one-offs versus series nowadays, I feel. Like if there is like a really good series, maybe I can get into it, but it's been a long time since I've read like a, you know, a series in full. I just don't, you know, it's just not something that's a part of my, I don't know, it's just not something that's appealed to me as much as it did when I was when I was younger. And part of it is like, you know, a little disappointing. Like I wish that I could kind of like recapture that and really be like, yes, I'm gonna just get into a book, stay up, you know, all night reading it, which is what I did when I was younger, when I was a kid. And I read just like multiple series in a week. Like it was, you know, it was just different, you know. And part of me, I think, thinks there is some level of where you could fault, you know, the internet and all those kinds of things. But I think that might be, and while that might be true, that is also just kind of a shallow argument. It's like, okay, sure, it exists. Many things exist that can distract you and take your attention away from these kinds of things. But I mean, it's people still read. Like, people still read a ton. There are people out there that obsess over reading, which I think is awesome. I think that's really cool. And I'm jealous of the fact that some people have, you know, you could argue the attention span and the ability to, you know, consume and get consumed by reading. I just don't have that anymore. And maybe, again, it's something that I could potentially bring back into my life in terms of what I want to do as a extracurricular thing. And I do read. I still do read once in a while and sometimes, but it's just difficult. You know, it is sort of the ease of entrance of getting into something. And I think, especially with series, there's such a high, it feels kind of daunting for me to get into it and then realize that you might not be as interesting, which is fine. It's just sunk cost. You let it go and then you move on. But I have in the last few years or so, I think, just reading a single book that has a beginning and an end, and it's very, you know, self-contained, I think I found it to be a lot easier, and I think I found it to be more satisfying because I can take the time to reflect on the book itself. I did in the past, a little while back. Maybe it's been a couple of years since I've like talked about a book on here, but you know, I have, you know, talked about like the individual novels that I've read at that time. Yeah, it's I enjoyed that. I think that with words and with language, it's like I feel that I want to take in a page more so and take the time to do that. And that in itself, you know, adds up more time to reading. So it's again, it just sort of is difficult to try to do that with a whole series versus a single book where you can give it like almost all of your attention. And that's kind of what I've enjoyed doing when I do, you know, want to read something. So I don't know what, you know, I didn't have like a point there necessarily, but just sort of, I guess, I don't know, this has sort of been like a continuing conversation monologue that I've had about just, you know, my consumption of medium and what types of mediums that I've been really sort of, that's kind of appealed to me more. Of course, you know, I think more recently I found, you know, video games to be kind of that really sort of the, you know, draw for me in terms of what I've, you know, primarily spend my free time, you know, playing or using that time to get into that kind of thing, you know, involving discussions and talking about, you know, game stories and that sort of thing. And that's really kind of appealed to me mostly. But I guess I wanted to kind of extend that conversation to books as well, because that is sort of, you know, something that is very, that has been a very big part of my life is books and literature. I honestly, I think it's the amount of time that I've spent reading when I was younger is like kind of on par to the amount of time that I've spent playing video games. I think it really is like comparable in a lot of instances. So that's not something that I intend to like, forget. And I don't want to forget it, because there's a lot that I've really taken away from my experiences with reading books when I was younger. And I want to carry that forward into adulthood and where I'm currently at. It's just that I have a different palette now in terms of what I do want to read, and I think that's fine. It's fine that I've transitioned from going from reading entire series to maybe taking, going at a snail's pace, really, at reading a single novel. But that's just kind of the reality of things, And again, maybe my tastes will change. Maybe I will once again prefer to read entire series if there is like a series that really captures my attention. But that's just what it is for right now. Anyways, let's talk Mob Psycho. So I finished season 3 yesterday. And I thought it was a really good ending. I thought it was a really nice ending. I'll try not to give away, what exactly happens. I think sometimes shows, series, this happens probably quite a lot, where certain shows and certain series, they end prematurely, where it is sort of a outside force that causes it to end, whether it's, something like Netflix canceling a series, or, maybe there's some controversy with an actor where they're not able to continue going on with the series, that kind of thing, or there just wasn't, it just kind of came to a slow, death. And in the case of TV shows that do have an ending, it's like a lot of them, it can potentially be, like incredibly disappointing. I think the one that comes to my mind is Dexter, the original series, and then somehow in the follow-up series they like fucked that up too. I haven't watched it. Apparently it was like good until the ending, which is hilarious. It's like, how do you do it twice? Like, how do you mess that up twice? That's just kind of embarrassing. Was it the same writers too? Like, that's how do you screw it up twice? It's kind of ridiculous. And I feel like if you are like a hardcore Dexter fan, you're just gonna be bound to have, I don't know, trust issues at that point. Anyways, like the original Dexter series ending kind of comes to mind, because like the last episode is pretty bad, and it's like considered like the notoriously bad, series ending episode. Another one is, of course, Game of Thrones. I haven't seen Game of Thrones, but the ending of season 8, right, or season 9, was considered. I think the whole season was considered pretty controversial, just because the quality of writing and that kind of thing. So it's I think it's incredibly difficult. There are only like a few instances of shows that I can kind of think of that really like get a good ending. That get like a really just like a satisfying ending. Endings are hard, man. It's hard to end stuff. And I think in the case of Mob, I think they did the best that they could. And it's one of those things where it's like, I want more too. It's not being dissatisfied with the ending and being like, hey, that could have been better, blah, blah, blah. It's more like, this is a good ending, but I still want more. I want more of these characters. I want more of this world. I feel like there's more of Mob's story that could be told. Like there's things that could be expanded on. And I feel like the way the ending went, it's like, I feel like there could be potential for, I don't know, a sequel series. I think if that feels sort of entirely possible, but in terms of the core story itself, I guess that is kind of the ending of it. And it's kind of like, I think that with certain shows, I mean, there's so many different, situations that can arise in terms of, a quality of a show, potentially, just kind of the quality of the show just kind of going down, or maybe they're not able to continue doing things because the budget of the show was halved, or they brought in like a new studio and it doesn't look as good. Like there's so many things. I think I'm more so talking in terms of like anime series. And this series is pretty short. Like it's only 3 seasons. There's like 12 episodes per season. Really reasonable amount. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It doesn't, the quality is consistently great throughout. It feels like there's a lot of love and care that was put into each of these seasons, and for each of the episodes. And that I feel like is rare. I feel like it's really rare to see the level of consistency throughout, because it feels very cohesive. I'll eventually, I think I will eventually rewatch the show, because there's only a few. It's pretty, you could probably finish the series, like, honestly, like, in like a couple weeks if you really spend the time doing so. But I feel like going from season to season, it's not going to feel like a kind of like a whiplash, because it's the same studio, it's the same direction, it's the same art style. It feels very just, it feels all connected. And I think that's hard to achieve, I think, with like anime and that kind of thing. The writing too was great. The character kind of arcs that you see, the decisions that they make on who they want to focus the stories on, I think is really well done too. Like in this last season, there was some like unexpected, I didn't expect to see these like kind of heartfelt moments with these characters who are kind of side characters for the majority of the series, but they really get like a nice shine in certain episodes, and I think that really adds something to the show. And I talked about earlier, before I started watching season 3, about like how there's not like a really like this sort of like main antagonist, and really that was never the thing with this series. Of course, I guess season 2, you could argue, focused more on kind of like a clear antagonistic force. But and even in season 3 too, you do have that, but it's just not, that's not the main. This is not like a shonen show. That's not what this is. This is like a coming of age anime that happens to have a bunch of wacky stuff attached to it, with the spirits and the psychic fights and all of that kind of stuff. But it really comes, like, what I really love about this show is not the shonen battles. Like, the animation is really great and it's really cool, but it is just the characters, the people who are there, the characters who are there to help uplift Mob, and you see Mob's kind of development throughout each season, and who he eventually becomes, and it's all just so, it's good. It's like a really just beautiful, you see him grow up, you see all these other characters grow up, they get better with him and they get better because of him, and it's just like it feels, and I think that the way the show sort of ties it up, you get, and I know this is sort of maybe typical, I don't want to give too much away, but it is sort of typical with like kind of anime and that kind of thing, where you get like a shot, or you get sort of everybody together and that kind of thing. But I feel that for this particular show, that felt warranted, because you did spend time with each of these characters in some way, shape, or form. Maybe they didn't get as much screen time as others, but they still were a part of the show. They were a part of, Mob's life. Like there's it's all like interconnected, and I think you see that sort of displayed in the intro this of this season, where it's like there's one sequence where you see like everybody's hands just sort of like together, like there's like a really that's kind of symbolic of this entire season and show in general, and I don't know, it just does such a good job of conveying that message of there's a lot of themes of friendship and stuff that's very stereotypically an anime and that kind of thing, but I think that the show just does a good job of conveying that. It does a great job of conveying what it means to have some kind of community, to have people be that will stand by you. Like there's so much of that, and I think I can't think of another anime that does it as well as this show in terms of creating this sense of togetherness and stuff, and having so many great supportive characters. Like it's so, I don't know, it's very heartwarming, and it's really well done. I'm trying to think of like and again, I think I would love to see more of these characters. I would love to have more. It's just good. Like I want more, but that's like one of those things. It's like, again, part of me does think that there is potential for like a sequel later down the line, but I think where it is left off, it feels like it just kind of is this sort of like natural ending where they don't force, you don't just keep continuing this story that doesn't need to be continued, and in doing so, you potentially like retcon certain things that happen and ruin, these characters, these beloved characters, and that's a bit of a concern for sure. But the show, it just doesn't do that. I think that there feels like there has been completed arcs for everybody. I think one show that kind of comes to mind where it feels like there's the main thing that you are supposed to sort of take away from it, the main theme of the show gets like kind of diluted as the show has progressed. And I think for me, the one that kind of comes to mind is My Hero Academia. Like the central conflict, the central thing of that show is with its main character, overcoming something and becoming a hero. Like that's his whole journey. And that kind of arc for him, it sort of concludes in season 1, and he doesn't necessarily develop beyond that. I think if you compare that to Mob, it's like he consistently, there's always something for him to learn about, about life and, growing up and that kind of thing. And I feel like we don't get that to the same degree that we do for something like My Hero Academia. I also haven't seen any of like the last few seasons of it. I think I've gone up to like season 4. But I kind of fell off a little bit, and based on what I've heard, the quality of it has kind of decreased, and it just hasn't been as good or as interesting. It's become kind of a bit of like a typical shonen anime with fighting and that kind of thing. And I was sort of feeling that maybe sometime in season 4. But it's sort of like, I don't know, I think I felt as the series progressed, like because the main character already kind of went through his he overcame sort of like the main struggle and the main arc or whatever, that it didn't feel like that anything that was really being added to it. The conflicts that were being introduced were sort of like, hey, this is kind of the villain, they're doing something bad, they have to stop him. And it didn't feel that it was really, I don't know, maybe I'm being a little hypercritical here, but it just didn't feel like they were really focusing on Midori, who's the main character of My Hero Academia, where it just didn't feel like they were really focusing on him. It was just it was much so. I cannot talk today. It was more so that he was just kind of he was just kind of involved in the plot and the things that were happening, and it didn't feel that it was like impacting his character and his growth or whatever. And again, the things that have happened in the later seasons, I have no idea. It's just, it could be one of those things where, they're just trying to extend the show. It could just be one of those where it just kind of keeps going, right? Maybe sort of a serialized show similar to something like Dragon Ball. The shows, not that Dragon Ball is like technically over, I think. Well, I know, obviously it's over because, freaking, the creator passed away, Akira Toriyama. I mean, it might be continued in his stead for sure, but you know what I mean. It's the long withstanding manga and anime shows that sort of just kind of keep going, with no foreseeable end, But I don't know. It's been a while since I've thought of my Hero Academia. It's been a very long time. I don't know if I'll watch that anytime soon or ever, honestly. But I had fun for what it was, but I just have not. There were certain things that I was seeing, and I think there was like a part of the last season that I saw that I was kind of like, okay, this it's kind of like filler plot. Did they really need to include this? It just doesn't feel like there's any. I feel there's no emotional attachment to this part of the story. I do not care about these characters. They're in this is like a 3-episode little arc that's happening. It feels like so nothing. Anyways, yeah, so I finished. I'm very happy. I would like to rewatch it sometime again in the future, so maybe a little down the line. And yeah, so that's kind of that's what I've been up to. They released another trailer for the new Zelda game, Echoes of Wisdom. I am trying not to watch it. I actually won't watch it this time around because I think at a certain point, I think I have actually gotten enough information that I need to where I'm like, I'm good, I think I'm okay. And because I know I'm going to get the game. It's just more so like, ooh, there's kind of like, additional flavor. There's some things going on. But I mean, I will be getting the game. It's not really going to deter me. I've already kind of made my decision in my head. So, yeah, I think I'll like sort of pass on watching that. But, it's just little by little, man. There's every week I'll probably bring it up, but I'm excited. I saw there was like some rumor, and I'm taking this with the biggest grain of salt of like a Twilight Princess Wind Waker remake maybe being announced for the potential September Direct. Is there even going to be a September Direct? I'm not putting any money on it, But, like, of course I would want one. That would be fun to see, but if I was a betting man, I'm not putting any money down that there will be anything. Maybe they should, though, again, like, maybe they should have some kind of announcement, have a little bit more hype garnered up for the next system, and maybe have a little bit more hype for some of the remaining games that are going to be a part of this year. But we'll see. We'll see. I think there's definitely there's definitely some, you know, I don't know if it's a rumor or if it's just expectation that there is going to be a September Direct. I hope there is one. I hope there is one. I'm a little skeptical because just the timing of it, and of course, again, Switch 2 stuff, and maybe there's other things. You know, they're going to push it off until they announce the new system later in the year. I don't know. We'll see. But I hope there is, because it would be nice to get another update. Anyways, that's gonna do it for this week. I was gonna like maybe hold off for this weekend to, you know, talk about some other stuff, but I really just sort of wanted to, you know, get into my thoughts of Mob Psycho before then. And it's, you know, the weather's decent. It's not great. It's a little cloudy, but at least it's not, you know, scorching hot right now, and so might as well take advantage of that. Yeah, that's going to be it for this week's episode. Thanks for listening. This has been Save the Semantics. Signing off.